One of the other big moments here, as far as content and talks and discussions, was in and around cybersecurity, of course. And it was really nice to see that become front and center, because we think it's, we've talked about it, for a long time now on Control Trends. But that is an interesting fact. And the point is that building owners are now starting to take note about cybersecurity. And I think, the education that we all have been doing, Fred Gordy, us, all of us, and others, I think is starting to resonate with building owners and some of the system integrators out there as well.
Well, I sure do, and I think it's a good segue into our first guest coming onto the show, is that you have a very important first step to make, and one is to acknowledge that you can't, like you always said, security through obscurity is a doomed approach towards cybersecurity. So you need people that can explain this conversation well enough to make people move, commit to action. And I think our first guest coming up here that you'll introduce, they've got a real intelligent approach, and they've got a very simpler, I have one of the scorecards. Get your building cyber safe secure. Get your building's cyber safe score. So they give you the opportunity to do a good, bad, and ugly using a very simple but important methodical approach towards determining your vulnerability and then taking action. And they can provide the steps you need to secure your networks and your buildings.
Well, that's a good segue. First guest is going to be Tom Shircliff, principal, one of the co-founders of Intelligent Buildings. And what's interesting on the cyber side, and that'll be part of our discussion, is also the fact that they are consultants, and that the consultant side has starting to see cybersecurity as an issue and something that they are addressed. So join me in welcoming Tom Shircliff.
Dun, 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 dun.
Thank you. Yes, yes, musical chairs.
I'm humble, thank you.
So Tom, welcome. Appreciate you taking the time out in this gorgeous, gorgeous afternoon here in San Jose. And before we get into a couple things, from the consultative perspective, and again, you bring a whole new look at certain things that I do, or Kenny, or Eric, with our background and our businesses. What did you see, and what really stood out at this year's conference this year for you guys?
Well, a couple of things at a higher level, and one, it was as many people as I think we've seen in a long time. It was totally packed. And then also in some of our sessions, we asked the audience, who were first-time attendees. And in some cases, half or more raised their hands.
Wow.
So we have a core group that always comes back and is really pushing things for the industry. And I think we had a really big new wave of attendees here. And really, I think they were here to learn, but also there were a lot of people taking action. They were looking for solutions. They were going to pick somebody and do something. So I thought it was a very active conference this year.
Also, I guess too, I asked this to Ken and to Eric, is there one thing that really stood out in your mind, just from a technology perspective, that really caught your eye, that you guys are going to keep your eyes on over the next 6 months, 12 months, and things like that?
Yeah, I think so. We've all seen the emergence of analytics and the maturity of it, and that continues to march on. There's a lot of runway there. But the thing that intrigued us was water analytics. And that is something that we're seeing. We've seen it, big water treatment, that kind of thing. But what was interesting is to see solutions, and we're putting consulting time into this at the chiller and cooling tower level for how it not only relates to water usage, but what is the energy relationship there. And what it turns out is up to 1 to 3% of your total energy spend can be wasted just on inefficient pipes in your infrastructure. Not only that, we've learned that there's life safety issues with Legionella, and there's asset life issues. So that is a really, really big area with very little attention that's been paid to it so far.
Well, I had heard or read something recently where they said water's the new energy. And in this whole new shift on water, or concentration in water, how about conservation and conserving water? Is that part of what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a sustainability aspect to that for sure. Also, the cost of water continues to go up, so there's a business side of that. And as we just touched on, there's also, when you say water is the new energy, there also is energy it takes to push water. So in many ways, that is true. So I think that is a topic that's going to be really rising. You almost feel a certain maturity in energy. It's going to always get better and always get tighter, but that is almost an accepted topic that you have to tackle aggressively. And I think water is going to move up to be a peer of that.
Eric, have you, in dealing with the various folks that you do with at Stromquist, has water been brought up? And if so, what are your customers saying about water?
Well, I think for years we've sold BTU systems and water metering systems, and if you sort of think relatively about the cost of gas now, maybe into the cost of water, I mean, think about it. You go buy a gallon of gas, it's a certain amount of money. Go buy a gallon of water, you're paying more for the water than you are for the gas. And when that sort of dawns on you that you're doing that, and everything Tom's saying really holds credence, I think there's a great opportunity there to integrate the water saving solutions. Obviously, Kenny and I both sell variable frequency drives as you do, Mark. That's one way you can conserve water by having the chiller be more efficient. But so I think there's a dynamic of the sustainability, the energy factor, but also the quality of water is huge. So water filtration and stuff like that could be big too.
How about Kenny from your end?
Well, I'm going to grab the microphone
before I
lost my thought. But then this light keeps bothering me. Mr. Mayor of San Jose, would you please put these lights out during the daytime? Light litter is abounding here.
We are seeing it firsthand, Kenny. But you are in heaven here in light litter.
I am, but it breaks my heart because this is supposed to be the cradle of innovation and the top of the tech line here, and we got lights on everywhere. But most seriously, it's good to have analogies. But water in our area is like good Mexican food. It goes in, but it has to come out, and you pay more money for it to come out than you do when to buy it, right? But no, we do recovery, so we have to pay for the affluent water leaving a facility now has become a major concern because you're getting charged. It's an automatic assumption that if you had 100 gallons of water go in and you can't prove that some of that was evaporated or consumed or whatever, you pay for that same amount going out. So we've had a recent influx of water meters. So I agree 100% that the whole concept of water is rising in importance. It was like a well camouflaged, taken for granted utility. Now it's becoming a front row.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I've got a question for you.
Show, Eric. Come on.
Well, I've got the mic now too.
You're in control. We're in the control business.
Oh, Therese took it away. Therese Sullivan took it away from me yesterday, so okay. I'm going to give it back to you in a second. But sort of here's the question, and Kenny, you sort of sparked this. We really are at a great place of innovation, Silicon Valley, right? So they think differently, they talk differently, they work out of different paradigms than we do, right? And Tom, I want to ask you a question because you're dealing with teams of people that make decisions about smart building and investing in buildings and so on and so forth. Everything from CFOs to CIOs. As a matter of fact, part of your business model and part of your premise is you've got to get all those people on the same page. So my question for you is, what paradigm are they operating out of that maybe keeps them from taking advantage of this technology? And what paradigm should they shift to in terms of their thinking about smart buildings, intelligent buildings?
Well, real estate's in a transition process. I mean, it's really one of the last industries to take on big data and analytics and even simple things like local area networks. So we estimate real estate's about a decade behind the other industries that have already adopted these technologies: healthcare, finance, manufacturing, et cetera. So they're really just catching up. And part of the challenge is they are historically a very fragmented industry. So you've got asset owners and building managers and contractors and property managers and facility managers. So the ecosystem is very fragmented, and it takes a while to get that going. So we are seeing awareness at the top of that value chain, and it's just beginning to push down, evidence what we talked about the activity this year. I will make another comment on that when we were talking about water, is that, related to this topic, one of the things in water is not just the technology, which has been a little bit lacking, but even that system of the water treatment contractor and the BAS contractor and the facility manager, that whole people process is not quite aligned. So just to take a micro topic and then also answer for your macro question.
Very well said. I'm going to give the mic back to you, Mark. Oh, one last question for Tom. Probably not the last question. But, one of the things that one of the biggest jobs, quite candid, we got in Atlanta. It was kind of interesting how it happened. We're in the thick of things in the job, and my integrator called up and said, the owner said, if you can get us on Control Talk now, or Control Team, you come do a video after the job's done. He wanted to know if he knew me and if we could get him. He said he'll give us the job if we do that. And so we did the job, and afterwards we did the interview. And afterwards we got to be buddies. I started talking to him. He said, well, he had one of the biggest environmental law firms in the country in the building we were in, and apparently they were giving him a hard time. They weren't doing enough about sustainability. So part of the package we provided was, a big board talking about how much energy they were saving. And it made me realize, at least in his case, how important being perceived as being sustainable and green was part of his brand and part of his marketing. My question for you, are you seeing more and more people that's becoming part of their brand?
I think that has certainly occurred, and it's even sometimes, large tenants have made it a requirement that buildings have certain sustainability certifications before they'll move in. I think what is interesting in that area is that it is going from for a stereotype of a LEED where there's a one-time designation to more of how are you continually sustainable. And I think particularly for you guys here can appreciate that's really done with technology. And so even we had some sessions at the conference here where we talked about the role of technology in sustainability. So it's not just about caring and even behavior or even recycling and some of these things that we do behaviorally, but it's how does technology make sustainability an ongoing thing and a measurable thing as well.
Just one more thing on the sustainability issue. One thing I've noticed is that especially public-facing companies, companies that are out there on the stock exchange that are public companies, that they truly have invested a lot in sustainability, and they are actually reporting it to their shareholders. I'm seeing it in annual reports and things like that. So I think that's been part of the drive and the initiatives behind sustainability. But to your point, when you guys go in and begin talking with a potential opportunity, and you're talking about the strategy first and foremost, that's a foundation. How do you bring up this whole idea of sustainability, and do you also bring up water immediately?
Yeah, it's a good point, because sustainability is better off when it is part of a way of running your business as opposed to the strategy or the plan.
Right.
And I think that's been the most effective way to do it, because a lot of times we talked about technology in sustainability. Well, that can also help with your overall operating costs and other things that may not be sustainability related. So I think it is, ironically, a more sustainable approach to make sustainability part of the whole strategy and the whole plan. Now, having said that, we have had large Fortune 100 customers come to us where they've hit a sustainability wall. And they needed technology to punch through, and yes, it would save energy, but they were more focused on their carbon numbers than it was on operating cost or energy. So just an anecdote where they said, we've gotten rid of space, we've changed behavior, we've done all these things for sustainability, and now what? And they really wanted what we thought was energy technology, but for sustainability purposes.
Good. Well, I'm going to turn the subject, turn it a little bit, because Kenny mentioned about what you guys are doing in the cyber area, and how you have made that part of your, and I can't remember the actual diagram, I've seen it in your office a couple times, where in your quadrant it's all part of your, so tell us a little bit about this. You've got a cyber audit, if you will. Tell us about that cyber report card type thing that what you guys have instituted, and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so sometimes in the cyber topic, everybody gets all caught up in firewalls and penetration testing and all these IT things that can be important. But our surveys really cover that plus the other aspects that are critical. We talked about the people. So what is your internal policy? What are your internal networks? What are your contractor policies? You could have Fort Knox on a cyber protection, and if the guy or gal that has the keys to the door leave them on the table, then we've got a problem there. So this is really a more of a 360-degree view of what are the cyber risks, and we have had more and more companies ask us to do these surveys, because again, back to this fragmented industry, they don't even know what's in their closets or what the policies are. So it's literally a visibility question about going there and seeing it and touching it and documenting it and asking it a few questions.
Exactly, and I've heard that a couple of times, this, what's in my closet? And, you ask, you get 10 people in a room and you ask, do you really know what's in your closet? And you might get one person out of that 10 that says, yeah, I really know what's in it, and the rest or the 9 no. So Kenny, with respect to cybersecurity, and again, we've talked about it time and time again, and it's going to be continuing to be a subject that we have to talk about. Because I think it's one of these issues that is one of the most pressing issues that we in our industry face. Did you see a couple things in some of these cyber breakout sessions that really stood out in your mind?
I sure did. I saw the, I think it was after the general session, the keynote session, I went to a session a rollout where they were talking about facts and figures and how much cybersecurity now costs. Cost of cybersecurity attacks globally is $45 billion. A lot of that's lost money because they're buying software programs, antivirus programs, because they really don't get it. We saw that there's new verbiage now in contracts that systems integrators have to be very, very careful about, because they're now putting you in of having the burden of risk and responsibility. You're supposed to, if you're touching a network, you're supposed to have an expertise equal to or above the existing network that you're working on. And then they actually have clauses in it that says you're responsible for any and all breaches. You're responsible for any repair required. You're responsible to notify the public, make apologies. In other words, you better get really good at some kind of you have to have a stance. So and this is a layered thing. So you have from the C-level down to the people that aren't. We were told that there's agencies that hire people going into office buildings. They have no access control. They can walk around anybody's desk, and if they see an open computer, and they give you 3 strikes. But if you're caught 3 times not complying to the cybersecurity rules of your particular organization, that's grounds for dismissal. So I mean, we're seeing a whole new opportunity for, and to me, and I hate to say it, monetize it, but I think this is where we all play a role. I think like some of the top master systems integrators, like these guys that they're coming on next, they have solutions. I know that you all have some physical solutions with the Cyber Pro. I mean, everybody has got to make a move, and it's a teamwork. It's layered. So there's no single party, and the systems integrators can no longer walk away from it. They have to become, they have to incorporate that into their knowledge base, and they have to become maybe not experts, but they certainly need to know what they're doing, and then know who are the experts to get them involved.
So Tom, on the, sorry, Eric,
one question for both you guys. So, the cybersecurity, we've all been talking about that for a while. We've seen the doom and gloom. It's like, the cyber criminals are way ahead of everybody else we hear. But in the general session, I know it was Cade Metz or one of the guys was talking about the use of artificial intelligence and how that might be the answer to shutting these cybersecurity organizations down. I want to ask all 3 of you, does that give you hope, what you heard there?
I think it does. I mean, technology and automation always is a big help. But I'll circle back around to where we started with that can be diluted by policy or non-compliance. So I think you're always going to have the will and the organizational approach to that, and even workflow around it, and then let that technology, even AI, do its part. So I think that's I think it's going to play a key part, but we can't wait for it.
Right.
I would echo what Tom said. It's cyber's happening now. We can't wait for all this great AI stuff to come around and things like that. So, we've got to address it now. And I'm gonna get to Kenny. Well, go ahead, Kenny. I want you to answer that.
Well, AI, I think I did get a good feeling to answer your question, Eric. I did, because I follow that gloom doom speech pretty well, and I like to have hope and believe that we can crowdsource solutions like that, because there's no one person, no one agency. So we need collaborative effort at the lowest and highest levels. But the fact that we can, now that they've got tremendous processing and computing power, that they can track things globally, because a lot of these problems are not local problems. And therefore we don't think about them locally, but we're all being subject to them. We're all paying the penalties for it and the price. So to see that we have some sort of a team, that our government says we can't do it. You assert, I go on there every day. I get all the notifications, and basically everybody is saying that there's too many the black hats and not enough white hats, and there's not enough dollars being thrown at it. Until they actually do that and budget money, we're fighting a linear battle against exponential forces.
So Tom, let me ask you this: when you get into an engagement potential with a new client, and you bring up the topic of cybersecurity, which I am sure you do as part of your learning process or the process that you guys do, what's the reaction with most of the people? Are they, yes, we got to do something, or you know what, I'm not worried about cybersecurity, especially on my buildings and my building side. I don't really care, you know, it's not going to happen to me. You know, the types of answers we've heard for several years, and so from your perspective, when you bring that up, what's the general reaction?
Well, almost no one has awareness of it, as we've all been talking about. And I want to say what Kenny said earlier is that, you know, just awareness and acknowledgement is a step. I don't even, much less all the solutions, just acknowledging that. And it's hard to deny the facts when we say you have X number of buildings, you have X number of control systems. Statistically, most of them are connected to the internet. It's just true. So there's acknowledgement of that. But I'll tell you what's interesting is that whether you're talking to the facilities folks or the IT folks, when they hear and get that awareness, they realize that it is so untapped and untouched that it becomes a hot potato. It's almost like they want to put their fingers in the air and say, I'm not listening to a thing you were saying because they've done nothing. And from a department level, do I have budget? Do I have budget? Do I have people? Do I have to make a case for this? And so I know it's a little bit regrettable, but the first thing is it's so big, and I'm not touching it today. You know, I've got to, which is why really you alluded to earlier, it has to come from the top. It's an institutional risk issue, and it's a core mission risk issue. So I think it really has to come from the top, so that it's not a budgetary turf kind of worry.
Well, we're going to close out this segment. Tom Shircliff, Intelligent Buildings, really want to thank you for joining us today on this beautiful afternoon. It's been great, and hopefully, you know, we'll see you at the Control Trend Awards coming up January in good old Las Vegas. A good plug for the Control Trend Awards. Couldn't help it, you know. Indeed, Kenny. So thank you.
Enjoyed that.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome Control Trends. Shaun, Klann, come on and join the group here. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Shaun, you know, one of the things that I know, in addition to what Kenny had just mentioned, is, you know, high on your list and what you work with your clients is on the occupant experience, the tenant experience. We're starting to see that more and more become, it's gone from the kids' table to the grown-up table, and we're starting to see more discussions. Tell us a little bit about it from your perspective, what you see, what you're doing, where we're going with that.
Sure, Mark. That part actually really excites me because, you know, with 10, 15 years in this industry, we've spent a lot of time consulting around the business case around smart buildings, right? So we've had the opportunity here at Intelligent Buildings to build some financial models and business case for some of the world's largest global portfolios. And that's always been focused on what is the value proposition in the business case for, you know, the topic of smart buildings at large. Well, 10 years of that, we've vetted that out. We've proved that out. So the industry in this conference showed that we're moving beyond that. Right. And the next thing that's moving beyond that is saying, well, let's focus again back on the occupants and that tenant experience, right? So again, we're shifting mindset a little bit from, you know, ROI and dollars and things like that, because that's been proved out now. We know that. We have that data here in the industry, which has been fantastic. And now we're really trying to connect what everyone's daily life is at home, right, back to how their daily life is inside of the office, right? So we've become accustomed to smart thermostats and smart cars and smart TVs and different experiences at home even. And we want to bring those same experiences to the office, right? So now, how do we look at the technologies that are inside of our office spaces, which when you really look at it, are just an extension of web pages back to some type of a software somewhere, and how do we use that to empower the tenants and the occupants? So this is a great revolution that's taking place in the industry around thinking a little bit differently, and about how these experiences, these use cases, how we can tweak and massage the technologies to really create a better environment for the occupants.
But to that point, you know, we talked about the value, the business case, and we've made that. but then tying the occupant experience to the business case. So for example, we've heard, and they're starting to do more and more studies on, that if a tenant in an office is happy, they love the environment as far as the climate and stuff, they're going to work longer hours or harder hours, be more productive and things like that. And I've also heard where, from the business side, where that being able to maximize the lifetime value of a tenant adds a lot of business value to the real estate folks, so they don't have to continually change out and advertise for a new tenant, that keeping a tenant in their space for a longer period of time is more profitable to them. Have you guys looked at that from that perspective?
Yeah, I think we have. I mean, I think it's no secret that the cheapest tenant to acquire is a tenant that you already have, right?
Exactly.
So keeping them happy is kind of #1 priority. When we can look at little, small, subtle things like giving them control over the environmental conditions of their space, lights, blinds, shades, HVAC. It's a simple thing to do via a web page and technology that's been around for decades. It's just getting through that trust factor that before it was only certain individuals inside the organization that had access to that information, and extending it out to the occupant gives them the ability to have better control of their space. I mean, that's one of the #1 things that well, there's lots of factors why tenants move out,
Sure.
right? I mean, relocations, outgrowing the space, things like that. But sometimes it's just looking for new, fresh experiences, And when we're in a competitive market, really depending on where the economy's up, whether it's in an upcycle or a down cycle, sometimes you need to just look at that extra competitive advantage to differentiate yourselves from the competition. And small things like that can go a long way.
So again, this whole idea, this notion about the occupant experience, is these types of discussions at the C-suite, or is it at the facility side, or is it both? Where would, the control trend audience, where would you suggest that they begin those types of conversations?
Yeah, so no surprise that it impacts everybody, right?
Right.
So you look at how we're using those occupant experiences to better utilize our conference room space or our office space in general, right? So that's impacting people in leasing and people in different business units in terms of determining how much office space they need and how much floor space they need. You look at facilities and doing a simple thing again to empower the tenants to lower or raise the temperature in their space, right? There's been studies, and we've seen it firsthand with our customers, that the number of hot cold calls, a very simple thing like that, goes down tremendously, and just a little bit of simple empowerment like that. So it impacts all stakeholders, and in order to create those experiences, you often need to be able to have the integration between the different technologies, and of course that's where IT gets involved. You need System A to talk to System B, and often it's enterprise systems talking to facility systems. So it's an open dialogue that everybody needs to participate in. And yeah, I'd say the more people you can have in that conversation, the more creative you can get with these use cases. And we often call them, integrated systems of operations, or integrated system sequence of operations, or system experiences. And these experiences are just a new twist on the existing technology that we've invested in for many, many years.
Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you had a couple things you wanted to bring up.
Again, it's a great dialogue, and I love the idea that human engineering is emerging with HVAC engineering. So we're getting better results on that 330-300 rule, where that the productivity, the reduction of absenteeism. We heard some pretty cool things about IoT. So my question is, one example we had was there was a study done by Intel using our IoT information, so contextualization, all the smart devices. People seem to be leaving by 10s and 20s every day in an office building around 3 o'clock, going out the primary lobby entrance and walking a short distance to a coffee stand. So they learned from there that they brought a coffee kiosk inside the lobby. It was doing enormously well. People were happy. They were away from the office less. What are some of the real tangible, making it real? What has IoT done that you could say, this is an example, we solved a people problem or some kind of a problem using IoT?
Yeah. Yeah, so just great statistics around data that's either been around for a long time or just a fresh perspective of it. So occupancy data, maybe new technologies to leverage people counting and figure out how the space is being utilized. I think that's obviously we saw at the conference that it's a big mind shift in thinking about how are this spaces inside the real estate being utilized, right? And whether it's better asset utilization, better space utilization. That's a key factor, and we've seen all kinds of examples from how space is not utilized less on a Friday or the day after Thanksgiving, and all these good studies on Fridays during the summer, right? Sure. So when we know that information, again, we can react with it, we can control the spaces better, we can plan better. So it's just an extension of taking that existing information and turning it into actual information.
When all this innovation and technology is there, and as you described it again, it's probably been around for a while. What is holding us back from marching forward uniformly to taking advantage of all this technology? What are the pushbacks that are still latent in organizations, and how do you overcome this?
Yeah, it's really it's an education and a change management thing. I think are the two. Yeah, I mean, I think one, you have to educate people. That's it's a different approach, right? Absolutely. It's a new way of doing business, a new way to design buildings, new way to construct buildings, new way to operate buildings. It's not fundamentally different, but it's different than the way we've done things for many years. And we've seen that if you do it on one project, there's a bit of a learning curve associated with it. But then the individuals associated with that project take that learning to their next project and their next project, and it just becomes easy. It becomes status quo. So I think we're just in a place in the industry where we're just trying to get over that first hump, and as we get through these first projects where there's a little bit of a learning curve with it, we're gonna just see it be the standard, the norm. So
I think Eric's got a couple.
Yeah. So Shaun, the first time I met you, you were the moderator, if you will, at the Realcomm IBCon boot camp. And I think for our Control Trends audience, because we got a lot of integrators out there that are trying to meet real estate's demands, what sort of things are, first of all, talk about the boot camp, and what sorts of things are the real estate folks learning there that our customers might be interfacing with?
Yeah, no, the boot camp's been a great opportunity and experience. This year we're on our 5th year, right? And I think when we started, we never thought we would be doing, Introduction 101 to smart buildings for 5 years in a row here. And I think there's no reason why we can't do another 5 of this. It's a great opportunity for people who don't really, are looking to get just the initial education on what is smart buildings into this space. What can it mean? What are the opportunities? I mean, we start very simple, what is IoT? Right? I mean, that's a great place to start. And sometimes we go from 0 to 100 and we start throwing out acronyms, and we need to kind of just step it back a little bit and kind of define out what are we actually talking about. So the boot camp's really about, first educating what is the topic, what is the space, who are the players. It then goes through a process to say, what are your objectives and your strategies? If you're going to take on this project, how do you go about doing it? One of the things we did this year, and we did it last year as well, is we brought back some individuals from some large property management companies that had been to boot camp in previous years. And they had learned something, and they had been sitting in the same seats that the attendees were this year. And 3-4 years later, they came back with some amazing stories of what they were able to accomplish in the industry. So it was really kind of bringing that back full circle to say, sit in the seats here, get educated, go out, take some action. It's really a call to action. Come back 4 years later and tell us about your successes.
Awesome.
One comment on the boot camp, and I've attended it, and this year I was in and out as time permitted. But I also look at it over the 5 years that you've done this, things have changed in our industry. So I think, for example, when we went to the very first one, and I believe I was at that one, it was about connectivity, it was about integration, it was about interoperability. Today, I believe that that's a given. But you brought in, and Tom mentioned it earlier, we talked a little bit about data analytics. We didn't talk about data analytics in boot camp, the very first one, or whatnot. So are there things that you've added to this whole content area, if you will, that we didn't have in the first 1 or 2? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I think, over the last 5 years, the industry has gotten just a little bit more confusing and noisy, right? Because there's new solutions out there. Fault detection diagnostics, visualization, single pane of glass technologies, optimization softwares. There's a whole host of great vendors out there providing a lot of different solutions. And in a lot of cases, they're similar, dissimilar, they have overlapping features and so forth. But one thing we've learned is that it's impossible to do an apples-to-apples comparison in this industry because there's no two softwares, technology solutions out there that are identical, right? So it's a very kind of snowflake-like analogy and evaluation process. So one of the things we did in boot camp this year was we really boiled down to what the building blocks of a smart building program and strategy are, right? What are the fundamentals from IT convergence to end device protocols to the feature sets that you're going to use, whether it's visualization technologies or optimization technologies, cybersecurity, all those different things, right? So we had the building blocks, and we took the attendees through a process of really identifying what are the foundational elements of a strategy, what are the structural elements, and then what we identify as the finish elements, right? These are things that are very unique to your organization, but your only ability to get to those finish elements is if you first lay the foundation in the structure. So that really enabled the attendees to kind of get a roadmap, if you will, of how do you lay all these different building blocks together, so that you end up with a sound solution at the end of the day.
I think you had.
Well, Shaun, one of the things I think you guys do so well, and again, Tom mentioned it before, is those building blocks, the foundation. I think people gloss over that. I don't think they understand how important it is to get, like the players, like we always think it's all C-suite. You got to make sure you got the finances, but actually you got to get everybody. It's like a band. It's like a string section, the percussion section, the horn section. Inside of a building, you have 8, 9, 10 possibly different interest groups that if they're not behind it, they retard the process. They don't get it, and they don't agree with it. And then just tell us then too, how do you go around making those learning sessions easier? I really I just really appreciate the fact you guys do it modularly and you do it simple. You speak a very simple talk to explain to these people what's going on and how to set objectives.
Yeah, I think, with your first question on the building blocks and the stakeholders, I mean, that was something that, to be really honest, we only got to that understanding with 10, 12 years of experience. When we started the conversation, we thought we had all the answers with just the network connectivity piece or just the open protocol piece or whatever it was. But it was really the evolution and the journey that we all went through over 10 years of consulting in this space that brought us to identify that there's a lot of different kind of secondary building blocks and secondary components to an overall arching strategy, and there's secondary stakeholders as well. When we first started the conversation 10 years ago, it was just facilities and maybe IT. And we talked about that for many years. Sure, you guys know for many years at this show, we talked about facilities and IT. But then as we got more sophisticated in the programs that we worked with our customers, we realized what other stakeholders we need to bring in the mix to be successful, whether it's sustainability, leasing, asset management, real estate, energy. There's all kinds of different stakeholders that have a voice in this, and it's really important that we get them involved in the conversation very early. And it's been a learning process, even for us as consultants. It's been a learning process, and what we strive to do is take that learning from one customer and from many, many accounts over decades of experience and bring that to each individual new engagement that we have.
One last question I want to ask is, we've seen as, we've introduced new technology to the industry, new approaches, all that. We get the foundation and the building blocks. Have you seen the value proposition change over the years? And if so, what is the key value proposition from the consultative side that you think is important today that you talk to your clients and prospective clients about?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the value proposition has definitely evolved, and it certainly changes from customer to customer. There's no one single value proposition. It's going to be a little bit different from everybody. But what I can tell you is that the common themes we see from a value proposition are, yes, the tried and true are always there from an energy standpoint, energy reduction, operational reduction. That's there, and again, that's kind of table stakes on the conversation. The next level of value proposition is kind of where we started the conversation with the tenant and occupant experience, right? People are more focused on that. And the other aspect of it is, and I know you've talked about this a lot, and we've talked about a lot at the conference, but cybersecurity, right? That's again a new value proposition that it's one of those things that if you don't do, the risk of not doing it is so great, right? So you have to pay attention to that. So I think those are some of the new value propositions that we're starting to pay attention to. And the last one I'd say is a little bit of innovative or die kind of a philosophy, or just keep current with your peers and status quo. I mean, in one of the sessions we talked about today, it was is how long is it before smart buildings technology becomes, you know, analogous to your elevator? You
Right.
expect an elevator in a building.
Right.
You expect a fire alarm system in a building. So it's not that far along where
Mm-hmm.
you expect your technology to be the same in the building.
So, sorry, one more. So, with this idea about expecting, do you want to go out on a limb for the Control Trend audience and say, by such and such a date or in X amount of years, it will be expected?
I don't think it's that far away.
Okay, good.
I think it's
Good.
going to
That's a good
be.
thing for all of us.
I'm going to say it's under 5.
Okay, good.
It's under 5.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Smart building technology everywhere within 5 years. Shaun Klann, Executive Vice President, Intelligent Buildings. Thank you for being our guest.